Hi guys. So we are going to continue with the data collection and qualitative methods. We'll touch upon documentary and archival data and discourse analysis and participant observation. And as I mentioned last lecture, we are going to talk about a little bit about surveys. And it actually, the survey actually falls into the quantitative methods more. So for documentary and archival analysis, this actually depicted as primary sources. It would give you like evidence that was part of the or produced by a specific event you need to investigate. So it's not only related to like a particular event or process you need to examine, or produced, somehow or soon after the process or the event. It actually, it was like part of the event itself. So, for example, if you need to examine like the ideology of pan-Arabism and how it affected like decision making or foreign policy making under Nasser. So you need to, if you have like archival work, so like these kind of declarations and the meetings between Nasser and his cabinet, it offered you some evidence that was part of the process or the event you need to investigate. If you need like how the process of the building, kind of, or establishing a union with Syria, for example, in 1958. So you need to look into, some archival work in order to examine how like both sides came to or arrived at this decision in order to establish the Arab United Republic. So for but the thing is, it's part of the event or the process, but there is kind of a release period, so you cannot get access to these documentaries and archival works. Sometimes it takes like 30 years in order to get access. So it would be like kind of historical analysis in order to bring you back into these historical events or processes. So you need to be aware of this. So you kind of reconstruct historical events. So for some for some scholars, like the documentaries and the archival analysis or archival works, they are facts in themselves because they are part of the event or of a process. So they do not represent facts. They are the facts. But as I mentioned, because it takes like a long period of time in order to get access to, in order to use or to track down these documentaries and archives. So it entails kind of reconstruction of historical events. So that's why like as a researcher, you have an active role in this process of reconstruction. So that's why some people are like they are skeptical about using or relying heavily on these primary sources, because what they would offer, like like at the best kind of provisional hypothesis, and not likely to be like reliable results or conclusive results. But anyway, like if like some primary sources are available, and you need to make use of this data in order to increase the explanatory leverage, or to get more or to collect some evidence for use your research. So it's like it will be like a good starting point, and then you can like support primary sources with other methods or other tools in order to increase the reliability of your results. So like these primary sources, why they are important? Because they offer you some material you need, like to collect some data in order to help you out with answering your question or investigating the issue under research. So it gives you access to the personalities or the role of individuals in these kind of major events. Um, so it's like you focus on the agency of people rather than like escaping, sometimes, this structuralist and overly deterministic account of some events. Like, for example, back to like, Nasser, for example. So if you need to investigate, the like the intervention, the military intervention in Yemen, for example. So if you have access, to some archival work, or you have documentaries, so it would be like it would offer you some material in order to know how Nasser actually took this decision in order to undermine, conservative or reactionary monarchies, and how he established, kind of a line between like revolutionary regimes and reactionary monarchies, and most especially Saudi Arabia. So that's why he intervened in Yemen in order to erode, their legitimate ideology or discourse. Um, we were going to get to the discourse later, but if you have like, some documentaries, about, in order to analyze, the decision-making process, how like he consulted and deliberated, with the military officers, how he deliberated, with his cabinet, or he unilaterally took the decision. So it's, if you got access, to these to the minutes, or to like, the transcripts of the meetings, or like or some like of his speeches as well. So it would help you with the collecting some evidence to answer your question. And it offers you as well, like, degree of awareness of the historical context. So it actually, they brought you back into, you travel kind of in time in order to and to live, the events or the historical environment that led to or facilitated, these kind of events. So you get like the mood of the time and the feel of the feeling of the events, or the decision-making process. Some people like might use it for, in order to make some policy recommendations as well. So you might like write your research in order to provide, some recommendations, to draw some lessons from the past in order to help with the decision-making process by establishing, these kind of, or reconstructing these historical facts. This would help out with drawing some lessons. As I mentioned, like, some people are skeptical about using these kind of primary sources, but you can use these sources, but you can like be aware of, like, the weaknesses and what kind of shortcomings, might come out of using these sources. So, for example, like biographies. So you need, again, like back to Nasser, like if you need to read, like, some autobiographies or biographies about Nasser, so you need to be aware you can use them, but you have to pay attention to some events. For example, like Haeckel, like wrote a lot about this period, and he had like his own account about the free officers, for example. Some of the defected officers, they had their biographies and autobiographies. So you can use them, but you have to consider like several matters: the relationship like between the biographer and the individual you're like, interested in, like in this case, like Nasser. So you have like the intimate relationship between, like, Haeckel and Nasser, for example, or like one defected officer like Khalid Muhyiddin and Nasser. So that's why, to what extent you can establish a distance between like the way you receive, what they wrote about. It's a matter of bearing, like paying attention to this kind of relationship between both of them, friendship or like a tense relationship as well. So you need to because in some cases they revealed information they needed to reveal, and sometimes if they have like good like relationship with the person or the individual you are interested in, so they might hide some other facts or dimensions about the personality or the the behavior or the attitude of this person. And as well, it didn't give you like it didn't bring you back into the historical context or the like the big picture of a decision making or policy making process. So by focusing on individuals lives, or it didn't actually investigate the policy making process. So it might be a valuable source to have like kind of inside story, but it didn't tell much about what was happening outside, or what was happening in the wider context, or how like the regional system or the regional environment operated at that time. So you cannot actually trace the evolution of policymaking by using biographies. It's kind of a personal account, or account on personal or individual's life. And sometimes you have like some like you deal with omissions, like some it's kind of a private product, so it might be kind of incomplete version. So you like, because of it relates to like private lives, so like the family, some of the family members might have objections regarding to revealing some information or some data. So that's why you need to make sure like if you can get like access to full version, rather than like highlights that people needed to get their message across through to the public. So if you have like a full access to the full version, it would be like one step in order to overcome this kind of pitfall. um, and when it's written as well, like right after the defection of an officer, right after like the one major event, when people like during defeat, for example, when people were like or acted impulsively upon some events, or so the timing is very important as well. And to what extent this like this changed like from previous opinion, or from like future opinions as well. So you need like to juxtapose these kind of sources with other sources, or with other sources, or even the same source over a long period of time. And this would give you like sense about the intentions of publishing diaries or biographies about someone. Like same like concerns regarding memoirs as well. So you have like to deal with caution kind of with these kind of sources, because sometimes people like exaggerate their like importance or their position, or their effect in some events. So you need to detect some missing episodes. And you have to like this is related as well with something called like yeah, so you get access to this like archival work, or like some archives like in the UK, for example, like National Archives or Public Record Office. So you need to get a permission in order to get in order to get an access to repositories and to analyze some documents. And you need to pay attention to what was called like Data Protection Act. So you have like to abide by certain terms, like they might hold like some personal information about you, and you might have kind of agreement regarding to what extent the usage of the data as well. So you're not allowed to use the data in order to for like different purpose in order to damage, you know, the like, or to harm other people. So you need to avail yourself of the process or the terms of the Data Protection Act as well before using the archives. So one interesting article that made use of these kind of primary sources, like Violent in Crafting Counter Revolution. In this article, actually, he tried to examine how like reactionaries or counter advocates or like of the status quo or the conservatives actually put an end to the springtime of the peoples in 1848. It was in Europe, and he examined basically Prussia that actually got involved in or caught up into these kind of social upheavals. So he made use he got access to some memoirs or diaries in order to investigate, you know, how the king and how his cabinet actually took decisions in order to, in response to the course of the events, in order to put an end to these social uprisings or revolutions during the period. And he used this in order to eliminate or to roll out some rival explanations as well. So, for example, some literature mentions something about realistic account, like as a great power, they had some like coercive privilege over protesters or over social forces or demonstrators. So like they had kind of superiority with regard to like military and coercive capacity. So that's why they managed to put an end, to put down these uprisings. But actually, by using or getting access to these primary sources, he supported, or he actually sharpened his sharpened his argument by saying that like they didn't manage, you know, to prevent the outbreak of the uprisings in the first place. And actually, when they used highly or like brutal repression or deployed, you know, some coercive forces in the beginning, this actually backfired and led to like the new waves of the protests or the uprisings. And then by focusing on the other explanation, actually focused on the organizational capacity of the protesters or revolutionary forces. But actually, by investigating, you know, these kind of some historical facts, it didn't the weakness of the protesters didn't emanate from exhaustion of their revolutionary capacity or something, or like, you know, they managed, you know, to kind of to organize, you know, different cycles of protest. But and this actually, by focusing on their organizational weaknesses, this did hide, you know, the agency of the counter-revolutionary forces. So he used like these primary sources in order to examine how like decision-making process had been made between the king and his the family and the cabinet in response to different cycles of protest and different like twists and turns in the process. And related, like some like related point to this, like the institutional account as well, because like they had like, you know, the monopoly over coercive apparatuses as well. So that's why they eventually succeeded in cracking, putting down or the uprisings or suppressing the protesters. But actually, it didn't answer as well the differential success with which, you know, they responded to the events. So they failed in the beginning when the protesters actually achieved like partial success, and then later, you know, by enjoying kind of flexibility, rather than getting, you know, stuck into like old pattern of thought or ideology as conservatives. So that's why by investigating, you know, these kind of primary sources, how they responded, how they followed, you know, the events in other areas, and how actually they managed to prevent the eruption of new cycles in Prussia. So actually, it depends on the topic. Again, you need to investigate, or you need to, depending on the question you need to answer, and depending on the way you articulate your argument, and the way you need to be aware of some of the weaknesses of some sources that you use. So discourse analysis. So it actually bears some similarities, or it has like, it's pretty much similar to the framing, the one I talked about last lecture, when I gave some examples about social movements in Chile, especially the student movement. So you do care about the language and communications, like the role of language and the means of communications, like the text and the conversations and media, and how like the language and these like the communications, like they interact in a process of creating kind of institutions and shaping behavior. So in creating, you know, these kind of the interaction between like the different objects, they establish or construct, you know, the social order. And this social order subsequently is made up of disorganized behavior, by like, you know, some practices and organized behavior and practices that actually tied with certain rules and norms. So these like practices and writings led to kind of, or usually lead to, social interactions, and from these social interactions the social reality is constructed. So I'm going to explain this in like by offering some empirical examples. So you do care about, you know, these so you do care about, you know, institutions in terms of rules and norms, and how people, like, you know, get like conform to or abide by or legitimize, you know, some like social reality, or like certain behavior or certain institutions that actually established or the social order or the social reality. And this actually, it happens, or it's happening against the backdrop of some historical and structural conditions. And these historical and structural conditions is very is very important to legitimize certain power relations, or to legitimize the production and reproduction of certain discourse. So you do care about like the language and communications and this kind of social practices and social interactions in terms of power relations, and how these would establish and re-establish the social reality and social order. So you find like you analyze this discourse through using like politicians' speeches, like parliamentary records, like madabit, like People's Assembly madabit or madbata or records, if you need to examine how like the committee, the economic and social committee in the People's Assembly, for example, came to the decision by abolishing, you know, subsidies. So you need to, on gas, for example, or in food subsidies. So you need to get an access to these records in order to examine how the actually the language they used and how they communicated this to the public in order to legitimize, you know, this act and to re-establish or to actually like the social order or the social reality under austerity policies. You need to, again, like back to Nasser, if you need, like, the thing is here, you don't, it's pretty much similar to like framing. You assign meaning to some practices or to social reality. But the thing is here, you don't pinpoint any causal, you do not establish any causal mechanisms. You here just, you need to interpret some meaning. So back again to Nasr and Pan-Arabism. So if you need, like, if you have like an access to record of like the broadcast of Arab Voice station, for example, and you get an access to these records, and you needed to analyze, you know, how the propaganda techniques actually helped with the language used and the way of communications, how they communicated, you know, this idea of Pan-Arabism in order to get, you know, some to play into like masses feelings and emotions, and to get like more support to Nasser and Nasser's policies. How he was actually elevated to, like, you know, an Arab leader, kind of a hero to the Arab world. So if you get access to this, and by analyzing, you know, the language of the content of the media, so you need to without like saying, you know what, because of this, so people in Syria perhaps like organized demonstrations against, you know, Ba'ath Party after the Proca part, the actually with Egypt and Syria actually after the dissolution of the Arab social the union experiment between Syria and Egypt. So you don't actually make this causal mechanisms between like the X and Y. You just you offer interpretation or assign meaning to the content of the media. So it's kind of again like it's a kind of a system of meaning or signification. So you assign this meaning to reality or to social order in order to abide by certain like norms and rules. So for example, like Norval in her book Deconstructing Apartheid Discourse in South Africa, she actually traced, you know, how the idea, you know, of like separation between the white the white and the black actually came into being, and how they constructed, how they used like kind of the discourse, how they constructed, you know, this kind of reality through adopting, you know, particular discourse of not only segregation, but to legitimize, you know, this power relation and racial policies between the black and white, and how actually that was against the backdrop of the capitalist development, and how actually this helped with the rebuilding or redrawing the boundaries between insiders and outsiders. And this by pinpointing or demarcating the boundaries, the frontiers between like natives and Europeans, for example, this legitimized, you know, this power relation between hierarchical power relation and the discrimination against the natives, and how people started, like, you know, assigning meaning to and legitimizing, you know, this power relation between the two camps. Again, like Nasser, you know, after the dissolution of the Arab United Republic, how actually he used the propaganda technique in order to like demarcate the boundaries between revolutionaries or Republicans and conservative or reactionary monarchies. So like it's actually using, like, you know, this kind of language or the context of the text or the language in order to establish, you know, a new social order or a new social social reality. So you might disagree, but yeah, it does exist, you know, in political, in social science and in political science. So here, like, people might be interested in text. So here you do care about the language, the language used in the text, and this is related to the linguistic term and hermeneutics, actually, that gained a kind of level of importance in 1970, throughout like 1970s. And like, for example, how if you need to analyze how the new conservatives or the Bush administration, for example, took a decision of like invading or occupying Iraq, for example, by using, you know, this the existence of weapons of mass destruction. So you need to get access to some records from like the White House or the some like administrations in order to analyze, you know, the text and the language used to legitimize this foreign policy actions or the military intervention in Iraq. Like some people, like I mentioned, like they don't establish this kind of causality, like X causes Y, but I don't like it. Some scholars tried, like David Howarth, for example, tried to offer some operationalization, you know, some guidance, you know, or some way to operationalize, you know, this discourse analysis. And he actually he rejected, you know, this notion about methodological anarchism, like any things go, like any things go. So actually he tried to offer, you know, new definition of the discourse as like, you know, by defining, you know, this social order as like made up of a set of objects, and discourse is one of these objects. And then you can establish, you know, a causal relationship between a discourse as an object and another, you know, object in the social world, like panarabism and like the foreign policy of military intervention. So he tried to do that, but I'm not sure, you know, if it would be like, you know, a causality, but it might like still like it would like fall into, you know, this domain of interpreting and explaining, you know, some meaning or signification. So it might like, it might correlate, you know, with the creation, or it might contribute to the creation of events and social process. They refuse, you know, this causality because it has like this positivistic, you know, connotation, but they used like something similar, like contribution of the discourse as an object to particular event or social process or result. But anyway, it's still like, you know, using, you know, offering some steps or guidance on how to use discourse analysis in order to interpret some events or social processes. Or like, so from, instead of like focusing on the text, so you might focus on the context of the text, like interpretive structuralism, for example. So you need to here, like they needed to examine, you know, the context of the emergence of the military intervention in Yemen, for example. So to what extent, you know, the regional dynamics, you know, helped with that, like the relationship between like Egypt and Syria after, like, you know, the collapse of or the failure of the unionist experience, like political instability in Iraq, and the relationship between, like, you know, Egypt and the competition for regional dominance or hegemony between Egypt and Iraq and like Jordan. So you need to, people like they examined, they analyzed the context or interpret the context of this text in order to to assign some meaning in order to interpret how this social reality or social order came into being or was constructed during that period. Or like post-structuralist or post-Marxist like Howard, for example, they focus on the construction of social reality, and this like the power relations, basically the reproduction of certain power relations in society. But not only like it's post-Marxist because it didn't focus, or it's not reducible to the capitalist exploitation or this social and economic inequality in order to allow the workers to have their own revolutions and to establish a new egalitarian system. But it's basically from sociological approach, how this construction of social reality or social order, it includes some sort of power relations. It's a process by which the construction and acts of power that would actually lead to a reaction or a resistance and contestation from the other side or something like that. So that's why, like in the apartheid discourse, for example, how the establishment of a social order of this like racial relationship between the natives and the Europeans, this actually triggered a kind of like a movement of resistance that led to the collapse or the put an end to the system in 1994. So you need to read some of the scholarly, some of the works in order to get a sense how this discourse analysis is conducted. So for example, if you need to examine like how Sadat actually undertook this infitah policy, and you need to analyze the October paper he actually published, and he actually people had a referendum in order to ratify the new policies that with kind of promises of political reforms and economic reforms as well. So you need to know how the language it used in order to legitimize the withdrawal of the state or the rollback on some social and economic expenditures. And this actually how used like an alternative discourse by later, this is from Sadat, and how actually they introduced this to the public by allowing more space for public private sector in order to offer some room for the businessman communities in order to advance or to increase the economic growth and achieve economic prosperity. So this is how they sold the new policies to the public, by analyzing discourse, how actually the policies or the tax, either the tax itself or the way they communicated this through the People's Assembly or through the TV programs or the state media. Or again, if you need to analyze like the pan-Arabism and its impact on or like the in order to interpret the interventionist policies or the military intervention in Yemen, for example, during the 60s. So it all depends on like meaning and self-understanding of the action, rather than establishing this kind of causality. Yeah, one more tool or method that would help you collect some data for qualitative research. So you have here participant observation. So it's very rare in political science, but it's kind of common in anthropology or social and cultural anthropologists. They used this technique or this tool in order to investigate some some events or some social and political phenomena. So Weapons of the Weak, like Everyday Forms of Peasants' Resistance by James Scott, was like the famous one here. He actually used, he lived, in order to see, how peasants actually resisted, the power structures, they were embedded in. And he, like from, at the first glance, actually they seemed that they conformed to the norms, or they actually they did abide by this, or they actually subdued themselves, or they were totally absorbed into this power structure or power dynamics. But actually, by getting there in Malaysia, I think he mentioned something like they used like sarcasm in order to, as a way of resistance, as like they had their own way of resisting power structures. So the point here is you need to study like some political communities or some political groups or movements that they are actually the culturally different from your culture. Or the you need like, not necessarily, but you need to examine like Bedouin in Egypt, for example. So you need to, but I'm not sure if you can like you can conduct this kind of participant observation study there. But anyway, you need to as a movement, or as a social group, like, or a cultural community, you need to examine, because you are interested in like how they behave, how their behavior and their attitudes and their norms, and how this actually their cultural and setting or their cultural beliefs motivated some actions, or dismotivated other actions, for example. So you have to be like systematically involved in the process in order to get more data, and you have to play an active role in the process in order to get like deeper knowledge about their behavior and their beliefs and their motives, or but if you're like if your research actually like how much you are going to spend observing or undertaking this participant observation role, it depends on to what extent you rely on this tool. So if your research is based on participant observation mainly, so perhaps you need to stay for some time, like for a few months, in order to get rich data, to get access to rich data, or to avail yourself of their beliefs and motivations. And the problem here is like you need to strike a balance between the degree of involvement and your detachment from the group, or like, I hate like the subject, but like the group or the political community or the movement you need to examine, or you're interested in. So by getting like involved into the process, or spending some time with the group, so you might revise or modify your original hypotheses. So the literature like makes a distinction between like 4 types of participant observations, but it all depends on the degree of involvement and the revelation of, or to what extent you cover your identity as a researcher. So like the complete participant, like you live there, like hypothetically it's very difficult to cover your identity and to live with the Bedouin in Sinai, for example, but hypothetically. So you live there and you did hide your identity as a researcher, so you behave like you are one of them. in order to understand, you know, their motivations or their behavior, and why actually they have, you know, kind of different political culture, for example, and why they refrain from political participation, why they have their own like norms or their own social order in order to solve disputes between them, rather than resulting to like state institutions. Um, so, but here, if you like, you know, like covering your identity as a researcher, some people actually argued for this because it actually it would help with the like to reach like to get an access to authentic, you know, attitudes and behaviors and motivations, and this wouldn't affect the behavior of the subject or the like the group or the political movement you study. But actually here, if you can get access, you know, to some like you can collect like, you know, rich data, but the thing is I'm not sure if they can, like, you know, it depends on the topic as well. So sometimes, you know, researchers can hide their identity, but there is kind of a debate about this because sometimes like it's very difficult, like from like from like ethically, from the like the methodological ethics, this kind of dishonesty, actually it's kind of invasion of like people's privacy, and you can publish, you know, some data or about, you know, people's private lives without getting, you know, any permission, without having any kind of informed consent. We talked about last lecture. And there is another, like, you know, shortcoming here. I personally, like, I conducted interviews in Latin America, and I think one of the participants once said something about, you know, something about participant observation, that they allowed, like within their NGO, like they offered, you know, some space as an intern for someone, and he did hide, you know, his identity as a researcher in order to get access to how, like, you know, people how they actually arrived, you know, to particular decisions, and how they interacted, or how they networked with the other organizations. But actually I was told, like, you know, people actually were skeptical about him. So you never know to what extent, like, if you sometimes, like, researcher, they feel like, you know, they are smarter than like the participants, or their, like, the people, you know, they need to investigate. So they felt like, you know, they actually they had, you know, some skepticism. So that's why, like, any kind of data, you know, he got access to, like, or any kind of information or conclusion, you know, he drove out, you know, the attitudes, the it affected negatively, actually, the robustness or the reliability of the results or the data he reached. So actually there are, like, you know, some criticism regarding, you know, discovering of identity, and it's rare in political science anyhow, and it violates, you know, like the ethics, you know, we talked about in the second week, or and last lecture, about the informed consent as well. And then you have, like, the participant as a observer. So you participate as, like, an observer. You observe, like, you know, from your position as you participate from a position as an observer. So you need to get an access to trade unions in order to, you have you write your research on trade unions leaders, and how actually they increased their negotiating or bargaining position with the government in a given country. So here you are open regarding your identity as a researcher, and you negotiate, you know, with the leaders in order to get an access, or to have an agreement in order to get an access to their organization, in order to observe, you know, the meetings, in order to have access to some documents, in order to attend, you know, some some events, the organized, and this like would help you to develop some ties with the groups, and you don't have access to only like the decisions they took, but actually the processes by which or through which they took these decisions. And then and this is like the most adopted strategy in social science. And then the observer as participant and non-participant observer. So I'm not sure, it's kind of, it depends on the duration of the interaction. So it's like you might have like, you are open about your identity and you have like a formal agreement, but you have like, it's the difference between like participant as observer. It's like you have a brief contact, with the leader of the trade union as an kind of informant. So you have like, it's kind of like a short or one-shot interview, kind of, or observing without participating at all. Like, you attended like, a meeting at the People's Assembly, for example, or any government institution, in order to observe, how officials or some elites actually deliberated about certain issues, and then they made, this. They took this decision and communicated to the public. So you have like, you might get like access to rich data by participating and observing, and being kind of a member in the process. But some people, or some scholars had some objections or criticism regarding, this participant observation, because it's somehow unsystematic and inconsistent. So that's why the results are doubtful. So you need, like as I mentioned before, it's there, and there is always a way to increase like objectivity, and to integrate, one tool, or to use, one tool with another one. So you can mix, different tools in order to increase, the explanatory evidence. So you combine different methods in order to get more evidence. And it ended up like somehow it offered kind of impressionistic, kind of account, of how women kind of participated, in the uprisings in Tunisia, for example, or in Egypt. So sometimes like, participant observation offered, this kind of impressionistic, or subjective account about women participation, but you can always like combine this with interviews or like survey data or whatever. So you need to use like different tools in order to get more data, in order to supersede or to overcome some methodological like demerits or disadvantages of some tools. But the one of the advantage, or the like a positive point about this, you can get access to some groups. We don't know, we know little about this, about these groups, like some government departments, mafia, or like some gangs. You need to study their culture or their own world. So it's very difficult to get access to these groups, and this would help to push the future, the future agenda. You need to highlight some themes or some topics that would need further examination or investigation. Okay, so that's all for like participant observation. Okay, so let's talk about like surveys and public opinion polls as well. It's again, I initially allocated like 2 weeks in order to to cover the quantitative techniques or quantitative tools. But now, as I mentioned, we don't have like logistically, like we don't have access to labs, and we cannot do this online. And actually, you need like a prerequisite. You need to finish your applied statistics course first in order to build on it. But you learned somehow how to read like a regression table, and here, like, you know, you need to avail yourself of the surveys, you know, as like one methodological or one of the important methods, quantitative methods, and one important tool for data collection. So like the sample survey. So what do we mean by like the sample survey? So you need to get like, you know, accurate information about the kind of population by obtaining kind of a representative sample that would enable you to use the information from the sample in order to generalize about the population. So you are interested in the social characteristics of the sample, like the social background, the educational background, the age or the class, or the composition of the family. And this would, like, you know, this kind of it offered you it would help you and offer some valuable information about their opinions and their behavior. Opinion polls, it's kind of, it has like a different function. So you are here less concerned about the social characteristics of the subjects or the like the population or the sample. It's like you commonly like use this as a researcher actually, or the importance actually came in during the elections days, or before, like the run up to elections, to especially in democratic countries. This to predict, you know, the what political party or presidential who will win the elections. So this like the opinion polls, it has like some like some importance for politicians in order to guide, you know, or to modify their political campaigns. But you as a researcher as well, so you might be interested in these polls in order to examine political participation or voting behavior as well. If you So at this stage, perhaps you need to know how to use, you know, the data available, like some, like, you know, survey data or public opinion polls are available online. So at this stage, you might need to know how to use, how to make use of the available data, rather than like designing your questionnaire or your survey. But you might, like, you know, need to know different types of like sampling, how to sample, and how to phrase, you know, or how to design a questionnaire, and then how to make use of the available data. So you might not need, you know, to design the questionnaire by yourself, but it's, like, you know, important information to know. And the more important at this stage, how to use the available data in order to establish kind of correlation or causality between variables. So here you have like, we have like random sample design and non-random probability and non-probability sample design. So the first one, like the random sampling. So here you just eliminate, you know, any kind of bias. Meaning, if you have like a population, like if you need to survey, you know, the students at Cairo University, so this is your population. So then it's unbiased, because each student or each case in the population in the Cairo University has an equal opportunity in order to appear or to get to be included in the sample. So, for example, if you need to to know, like to survey, if you write your research on online teaching or online learning, and like level of stress, for example, or an anxiety level. So you have like all the ID numbers of the students from all the faculties. And here, like, you know, you have like a computer, you cannot do this, like, because the analogy here, it's like, not, if you remember, if we have like, you know, if we have a drum, and then we have like, you know, numbered papers, and then we put like the papers, pieces of papers, you know, inside it, and then we stir this several times, and then we can draw out, you know, the numbers. And the point is, in order to make it like in randomization, in order to meet, you know, the conditions of randomization, so you need like each time you draw out, you know, the sample or a piece of paper, you have to, it has to be replaced by another one. This is very difficult, you know, in if you have like, you know, the ID numbers of the students, or the actual, you know, the real the real population, and the drawing out random sample. But there's kind of a computer technique, you know, would help out with this. But generally, this is like, you know, it entails, you know, kind of financial cost and time consuming. So that's why people would use different other techniques that they would approach, you know, this level of randomization, rather than doing or drawing, you know, simple random sample. So they have like, you know, systematic random sampling. So you choose a random, like, you know, starting place on the sample on your like, you know, sampling frame. For example, if you have all the ID numbers of the students at Cairo University, and then you choose like, you know, like after every like 100, so you have like one case every like whatever. So you have like, you know, systematically you randomize, you know, the drawing out of the sampling process, and then until you get, you know, the size of the sample. So for example, if we have like the population at the total number of the students at Cairo University, supposedly 100,000, and then you need like a size of a sample of 1,000, and then you need like every 100 you draw like, you know, every 10 or every like, you know, you draw like, you know, one case, and then until you get, you know, until you get to the size you need for your sample. So the main point here, there is no like systematic variation in the population, meaning like it doesn't mean like there's kind of in order to make it like close to the simple randomization, so you don't have like, you know, systematic variation in the population, meaning like every 10th, if every 10th, like, you know, the person were like a female, or some sort of from like, you know, specific geographical area, or specific like, you know, faculty, like social science faculty, it depends on what you need to examine, like gender or geographical studies, or different if you need to if you have like, you know, hypotheses, you need to test about, you know, different education attainment, or online, you know, the difference between social science and natural science, for example. So this might be like, you know, systematic variation. So this would increase the sampling error. So this would make it, you know, very far away from simple randomization sampling. So you need like, you know, to be aware of what you need to examine, and what are like, you know, the kind of the pros and cons of each method. And then you have like stratified random sampling. If you have like clear information from like, you know, the the president of the Cairo University, for example, you offer like not only the ID numbers, but you have like information about the gender, like, you know, how many females, how many males, the number of like the students, or the geographical areas of these students, and perhaps like the affiliation as well, like the faculty they are affiliated with. So if you have like this information, if you have access to this information, so you might need to divide the sample into kind of homogeneous groups, and then you draw, or you take your sample, random sample from within these groups. So you divide like females and males, and from males and from females, you have like your random sample. Or if you like, you know, if you need like to examine geographical areas like rural and urban areas, so from these like homogeneous groups, so you take your random sample. Okay, and this actually, this would help with reducing the sampling error, but if you have access to the relevant information, and usually you don't have access to these information. And then multi-stage sampling, if you need to examine like, you know, electoral constituencies. And for practical reasons, for practicalities only, this would be like, you know, in Egypt, for example, like you have like, you know, for example, like 220, for example, like electoral constituencies. And then this is like large national samples. So you need to for practical reasons, you need to divide them into groups or areas. And you draw samples from within these areas or from within these groups. So it's much more convenient for you. It's not because of kind of homogeneity or detailed information about, you know, some groups. It's just much more convenient for you to do that. And this actually would increase, it would decrease, you know, the financial cost. Like if you need like to save up some money from like, you know, transportation, from like from moving between different villages, for example, this would increase like the sampling errors, because like they don't share any kind of characteristics together, like as electoral constituencies. You just like, you know, like pull them together in order to for practical reason, because you cannot like, you know, travel across, you know, these kind of different remote areas. And then cluster sampling, it's pretty much similar to the multi-stage sampling, but the point is the groups, the groups of individuals at the last stage, it's like it's not like the clusters of groups, it's not individuals. The last stage, it's like, you know, you have clustered groups, not only individuals. So the individuals are not like an area, so you cluster, you know, some areas together, like, you know, it's not like villages, it's like merekes, for example. Or you have like group of people, a group of villages, in order to increase, you know, to decrease, sorry, the cost of the transportation cost. So if you need to examine, you know, the impact, you know, of like, you know, the outbreak of like, you know, coronavirus on villages in Delta, for example. So these are the clusters or the clustered groups of villages had to be comprehensive, like, you know, the collectively must cover, you know, the entire population in the clusters in these, like, you know, in these villages. You have to cover, you know, the entire populations. And mutually exclusive, meaning like all cases that belong to one cluster, they don't like belong, or they don't appear more than like they don't appear in more than one cluster. So you have like, you know, like different clusters, and they don't have like, you know, they appear only like the groups, the villages or the group of people, depending on the topic. They don't appear on more than one cluster. This is like the random sample design. And one important like methodological caveat with this, like whatever like the design you adopted, if you need to examine like change over time, like the increasing number of like political, like the turnout in elections between different villages in rural areas, for example, if you need to change like if you need to examine changes over time, survey data wouldn't help with this, because they don't offer panel data. Panel data meaning you need to survey the same people like this year, like every 4 years. You need to in a given country, there is kind of a parliamentary elections, and you need to investigate or to examine political participation in rural areas, in villages. And then like in the subsequent elections, after 4 years, it's very difficult to survey the same people you surveyed actually in time one. So that's why you don't have time data, panel data. So you cannot like actually trace changes over time. This is one of the important like problem with the survey data, because it's very difficult. People might reject to get surveyed again. Like some people like migrated, some people died or whatever, so it's very difficult to get like the same like to survey the same sample again after 4 years, or like for the second time, generally speaking. And then for non-random sample design, so it's very common in like marketing or voting behavior. So here you don't care about representation of the sample of the, like to what extent every case has an equal and independent chance to appear in the sample. You just care about a quota of people you need to interview or you need to survey. So if you have like a product, if you work in marketing and like in a company, and you need to examine, to assess the market kind of viability of a particular product, like hijab, new hijab, or whatever, see your quota would be like middle class or working class women, and you pay attention to the key characteristics that they are relevant, and to make the quota, to get the representation within the quota, like the women like from different classes or from different geographical areas. But the difference between the quota and the simple random design was like the members in this, like in the sample, cannot be replaced here. It's like you don't care about ethnicity, age, class. So it's very difficult to calculate how representative the sample is. And then the snowball samples, it's you need to get access to, again, to a group of people or to like communities that they are actually hard to access. So it's by definition it's not representative. And so someone actually, like one Badawi, like referred to another one, from another qabila, from another tribe. So you need to get to have like to survey or to interview. So this is snowballing, process. You get like you get access to this political community or political cultural community. So it's helpful. It's not representative, and it's very difficult to draw like to have conclusive results, but it's helpful to generate some hypotheses for future studies. So designing the questionnaire is very important. And here you need like, you have hypotheses and you need to test. So you design the questionnaire as a translation of your hypothesis in order to translate your hypothesis into like carefully designed questions in order to test, you know, the relationship between your variables rigorously. So when you design the questionnaire or the questions, so the wording is very important. So the way, for example, it's pretty much, you know, similar. Don't use like, you know, vague language. Don't use kind of leading, like, you know, in order not to give or to deliver contaminated, you know, message to the participant. Pay attention to sensitivity, you know, issues or questions, and the length and the logical sequence of the questions as well. I'm going to explain this in some detail shortly. So I mean, if you know quite well, like people don't use like would refrain from, for example, giving like honest answer about their income. So you might use like, you know, these kind of people use like these intervals in order to get like a range of their income level. So use the same language. So don't assume like people, like, you know, you study political science, so you might aware like about some terminologies. So don't use like, you know, the same terminology that might, you know, confuse people. So be like, the question has to be clear, has to be like, you know, pay attention to, like, you know, if you examine like, you know, ethnic minorities or religious issues, so pay attention to the sensitivity issue. And don't use like vague questions or long questions as well, because it's very difficult to give like a clear and consistent interpretation or answers. For example, here, this is from your readings. If you have like, if you examine the relationship, to what extent, you know, the weakness or the strength of the relationship between trade unions and the Labour Party in the UK, and then whether or not to have like, you know, secret relationship between trade unions, it's an advantage or not, you know, to have, you know, this relationship. So this is like a double and like, you know, ambiguous question. So do you think it's a strength or a weakness of the Labour Party that it should have a close relationship with the trade unions? In other words, should they stress should they stress it as an advantage to be close to the trade unions, or keep quiet about it? So the first part of the question, you need an answer about, you know, the weakness or the strength of the relationship between how the participant actually thinks about this relationship. It's strong or weak, okay? And the second one, whether or not, like, you know, this close relationship, you know, has to be like, you know, clear to public, or might be a secret relationship. So the thing is, like, here they might think, like, the participants, you know, might think it's kind of a strong relationship, but they need to keep it, you know, quiet, or like, you know, secretive relationship between both of them. So it's better to, like, you know, it's much more better to, like, you know, to divide this into two questions, because you might have, like, you know, you might not get, like, you know, clear or precise answer, or they might answer, you know, one of these, not the two of them. Like loaded questions as well might yield different, would affect the answers. Here, for example, with the example about the social classes, it's very hard to spot, like, you know, loaded questions are very hard to detect or to spot. But like sometimes, you know, it would be, like, you know, clear, especially if you have, like, you know, pilot study, so you need to test, you know, your survey first before like getting to the actual, you know, population, or the actual, to get this to the actual participants, in order to detect, or to spot, some gaps or some questions that needed, to kind of different wording or rephrasing. So here it's kind of, there's quite a lot of talk these days about social classes. So most people say they belong either to the middle class or the working class. Do you ever think of yourself as being in one of these classes? So you offered kind of binary choice between, like, two classes. And this actually got an answer like 66%, according to the reading or this study. They got like 66%. They responded that they belong to one of these classes. But when they rephrased the question, like, like social class, generally speaking, they got like only 50%. So they affected like the accuracy of the results as well. I have some examples from the Arab Barometer survey, and in the last slide you have, like, the links to get access to the survey. So here, like, if you need to test to what extent like the participant really believes in, like, the separation between like politics and religion, or to what extent they but you don't need to, because it's because it's kind of a sensitive issue, but this is like in 2011, so perhaps it's not anymore, but like this is like the survey, the second wave in 2011. So you need to examine, this kind of sensitive issue about the separation between, like, religion and the religious establishment, or like religious figures or leaders from politics. Okay, and then but you cannot phrase it as, like, do you agree that, like, excluding, some religious leaders from political process or from political institutions is like important or whatever, and then you have like a range or a scale from strongly agree and strongly disagree. This is kind of like loaded, and you direct, the participant to get, like, some answer. So here you have, like, some statements, and you test it, differently through, like, different questions. So perhaps, they agree on like the intervention. They don't agree on, like, the intervention of religious leaders in voters' decisions in elections, but they might, they might have, like, they might like religious leaders should have influence over government decisions. So they might agree on one statement and disagree on another. So you test it, like, differently, and over, like, a range of statements. And then how the exclusion from public office or from public positions as well. So if your country is better off if religious people hold public positions in the state, so you phrase it in, like, kind of a positive sense, and then or, like, kind of neutral statement, or like it doesn't, like, it doesn't have any kind of loaded message, and then you have, like, a range of answers to the participant to opt or to choose between. Practices, yeah, and they might be, it doesn't mean, like, if they believe in, like, separation between like politics and religion, it doesn't mean that they are not, like, religious, or they not believe in religion. So that's why you have, like, the religious practices are private and should be separated from social and private life. And then you can, like, test, how people define, this separation between, without using secular like, notion or the conception of secularism. And here, if you need like, yeah, if you need to differently to examine to what extent, they agree on excluding, Islamist or Islamic parties from political dynamics. So you here have different questions from like in order to test, the inclusive, policies or viewpoints of the participants. So the preference, if you it's not like, to what extent they agree that, these kind of systems are appropriate to their countries. So you have like, a parliamentary system in which like all like ideological forces, nationalist and leftist and right wing and Islamist parties compete in parliamentary elections, like inclusive, electoral politics, or in which only Islamists compete in parliamentary elections. So you test here kind of ideological underpinning or background of the respondents. And then the political system governed by strong authority, which makes decisions without considering electoral results or opinions of the opposition. So you hear like, you need to test or to survey the answers. You need to get some answers to what extent, they would agree on like reinstatement of authoritarianism or something, and like, leaving, this parliamentary and the electoral politics altogether, or a system governed by like Islamic law without elections or political parties, like here theocratic, whether or not, they would agree or would see this appropriate, not agree or disagree, but they would see this appropriate to their countries. And then a parliamentary system in which only non-religious parties, in order to test, the exclusion of Islamists and allowing only non-Islamists to compete or to contest in the elections. Okay, so you have like, so you need to I would actually recommend, to visit the website and to have a look to the questions in order to get, some sense of about how they actually phrased, these questions, and to what extent they actually abide by, this these kind of criteria about clarity and the logical sequence, how to what extent, they are the like logically put, and the length of some questions as well. And there is always, what I want to say, that like you can always like, find some sort of criticism while evaluating or assessing, any questionnaire or any like survey questions. Like you have different types of questions, like open-ended and closed questions. So sometimes you have in the survey, you don't have like specific answers. So you offer some space for the participant in order to answer, and you don't. But here, like, you offer, the participants some degree of freedom, but it would be very difficult. I'm gonna show you in some shortly, how open-ended and closed questions work. And the closed questions, you just offer like list of answers, and the thing is, it would be very easy for you to code or to interpret, but it for the participant, you just like you imposed, some kind of predetermined answers in order to choose between. So for example, if you need to examine how people define civil state, because sometimes for them it's only non-religious, but it's okay, for example, to like to have like, a role for the military. So you need to examine to what extent people like, would define, civil state. So after examining, this degree of inclusion and exclusion of different ideological forces, or like, their stand towards like the positions of different religious leaders in the society. So here you need to know more about their definition about civil states. So here you have like, do you prefer that the state be like religious or civil? And then you might have a question, if you opt for, or if you choose one, how you define civil state. This is like open-ended question, but it would be very, very difficult for you to interpret, how to create like a coding. Like you have like, if you have like a sample of size of like, you know, 1,000 or 2,000, it would be very difficult. You might have like 2,000 answers. So that's why you might put, you know, some choices that might cover, you know, our, like, you know, a range of opinions. So here, like a civil state is one in which the people are the source of power, and the state is governed by constitution and the law of with citizenship being the highest value, irrespective of religion or state. So this is like, you know, the definition of the civil state. And then perhaps people might define the civil state as one in which people really the source of power, but the state is and governed by the constitution and guarantee kind of citizenship and law and order. But Islam constitutes its culture and civilizational frame of reference. So this might be like a definition of a civil state, like, you know, the state, but the constitution has to entail, you know, kind of to include, you know, an article about, you know, this civilizational frame. Or it's all that, but like the source of people are the source of power, and the constitution and citizenship rights, but secularism constitutes its cultural and civilizational background. They don't have here a question about, you know, it was like in 2011, so perhaps like, you know, in different design, you know, or in different surveys, you know, the World Value Survey, for example, they have like a question about, you know, if they believe in military intervention in politics. So here, like you have like, you know, the like predetermined choices, and you ask any, and they are free to decline to answer. So you give like, you know, some sort of space for respondents to choose, or like, you know, I don't know, like, you know, people simply they don't agree, or they have like a different definition, so you are not like imposing any kind of answer on them. And you might use the data here in order to again, you run like, you know, like regression models, or you have like, you know, statistical modeling. You need to establish kind of a relationship. So here, like I used like 2011 and 2013 in order to examine to what extent the degree of distrust of the Islamists, mainly the Brotherhood, would support the level of support for democracy or democratic suitability of the country. So this variable about democratic suitability asks whether or not it's a range from like, you know, 0 to 10 scale, and then people to what extent, you know, they believe as democracy is suitable for their country. This is the question. They have like another question about, you know, the degree of trust, if they trust from strongly trust or to strongly distrust the Brotherhood. And then like you might, you know, plot or graph, you know, the relationship or the correlation between both, like in different years, in 2011 and 2013, in order to see how the degree of distrust of the Brotherhood actually dropped, you know, or like triggered, you know, or drive people to withdraw support for democracy in 2003. So here, like, you know, you have 2011, 2013, and the line in the middle is the mean value. And then, so you have like the difference, you know, between like for people, you know, who are, strongly trust the Brotherhood, this is number 1 through 4, strongly distrust, and how, like, you know, distrust of the Brotherhood in 2011 actually, between 2011, the last 2 bars, here, like, you know, they dropped from roughly like 7 democratic suitability to 4 in 2003. So people who actually distrust the Brotherhood dropped their opinion about the degree of suitability. As I mentioned, they don't survey the same people, so it's not the panel data. So they are not the same people in order to like to examine, you know, to what extent they themselves changed, you know, their opinions or views over time. But anyways, you know, this is like available data, and you can make use of the data. And here you have, like, you know, the access. This is the link to the world, the R barometer survey data for all countries, and you have like different waves. So the questions here I used from 2011, and the graph I created from 2011 2013, the second and third waves. And with the surveys, like, you have like a code book as well, so you will get, you know, some information about how representative, how they roll out the samples, and to what extent, you know, they are represented. And you have, like, you know, some questions about social and educational characteristics or background of the participants. Yeah, okay, so that's all. So we have like super, hopefully I can finish with the like, I will finish with the literature, the grading of the literature review by tomorrow, and I email you the grades. I'm not sure if we will need, like, you know, Google Meet or something like that to discuss, you know, it depends on the comments, you know, I will or the feedback I'll offer. Or I can have, like, you know, one lecture. I can have, like, you know, as I mentioned, makeup lecture for week 6, because I still have, like, you know, half an hour, you know, in week 6, and perhaps half an hour this week. So I can like arrange or deliver a lecture about your literature review, or we can have like a meeting if I need, like, you know, more to get you more engaged somehow. And then we will have, like, you know, one last lecture about mixed methods, triangulations. And if you remember, I mentioned something about philosophy of science in week 2, and actually I delayed this or postponed this to the very last week in order to help you, you know, get accustomed to my way of delivering, you know, the lecture, and to get, you know, more information that would help you digest and absorb some information. Yeah, okay, if you have any questions, so hopefully I'll get back tonight or tomorrow. I'll get engaged with the online discussions as well. And see you next week. Bye.